How often do you take a break from the pulpit? How many Sundays do you preach a year at Christ Church?
It depends on the year, but I would say I'm probably in the pulpit at Christ Church 45 or 46 times out of 52. And when I'm not in the pulpit at Christ Church, I usually am preaching somewhere else. So out of the year, I'm probably not in the pulpit somewhere a couple of times a year. So the most of the times when I'm not in the pulpit, it's because I'm traveling, preaching somewhere else.
Okay. And do you recommend young preachers be out of the pulpit a certain number of times per year for rest?
Yeah, I would say you should take a vacation. There should be a form of taking a break. But for many young preachers, that translates into young churches. Churches that cannot, young flocks that cannot afford to have the shepherd just walk off, and there's not someone there to take it and so forth. So I would recommend, if possible, for a young preacher to take at least a couple of weeks off a year. But that could be like telling a young mother of 6 children, why don't you take some time off?
Right.
Because I have responsibilities.
It causes more trouble, not less.
Yeah, it causes more trouble. So one of the things and this is something I had to deal with, and I don't really have it sorted out, but you don't want to be in the position of a preacher who dreads going on vacation because of the pile that he will have when he gets back. So, okay, why don't we make you take a vacation for 2 weeks as a gift? Here, let us give you a gift. And you want to make sure that it really is a gift, because what you're doing is insisting, you're 3 weeks behind normally. Here, let's make you 5 weeks behind. Right. So you want to make sure that you're not telling someone to make bricks without straw. If you're basically, I would tell a young minister, you want to have a good group of elders with you, and you want your elders to watch out for you, and you want your elders to sort of make sure that you take vacation, make sure you have time off, some sort of sabbatical during the year. But you don't want the sabbatical to be something that hammers you worse than staying on the job would have been.
Okay. How do you prevent the burnout in the pastoral position? I mean, you hear a lot of guys who hit the wall. What are your suggestions for them?
Yeah, the burnout is a real problem. But let me recommend a book here. I just recently read Paul Tripp's book, Dangerous Calling, which is really good on dealing with pastoral burnout. And one of the things that it comes clear in that book is that oftentimes burnout is not the result of working hard. Burnout is the result of working wrong. Right. So if you love what you do, and you love the people you work with, and you love the cause of the gospel, you can fall into bed exhausted at night, but not burned out. Burnout, I think, is largely a function of resentment, isolation, bitterness, envy. That's where burnout comes from. Yeah. And which is quite different than being really tired. Right. So I think a minister should work hard. I think a minister should work hard enough that he falls into bed ready to sleep hard. That's a healthy sign. Right. But if you're just frazzled and fried, then the chances are good that you're not getting fed. You're not being fed by the work you're doing. You're not being fed by friendships. You're not being fed. You're not being taught by someone else. So I would say that's something to pursue.
What you're describing there is the symptoms of a man who's working on his own. So you said isolation, without friends, right. Bitterness and resentment. Those are all just attributes of a guy who isn't capable of working with men shoulder to shoulder. He has a problem with that. So it sounds like a big part of this is making sure that you've got a larger team with you. How do you cultivate the kinds of friendships with men who want to stand along and work alongside you?
One of the ways is to make sure that you don't lower the bar of elder qualifications in order to get warm bodies, Because if you just say, oh, we need people, we need people on the board, and you lower the bar in order to get people, then all of a sudden the people you're working with will have to turn into the people you're working on, right? And you just really need shared values, shared assumptions, shared commitments. And it's not that a board of elders has to be sinless. That's not the issue. But it should be generally together enough that the elder meeting doesn't have to turn into a ministry meeting where you're trying to keep everything.
Right. So there's something you negative, don't do that.
Right.
What's something positive action that you can be taking to draw those men to you?
Well, one is to spend time with them. Spend time with them. Spend time with them in the elder meetings. Cultivate friendships with them outside the elder meetings. That, I think, you want to be a team, a genuine team where you do things together.
I was thinking of this morning at the elders meeting. You brought an observation out of a random passage from Numbers about the sort of the general disposition of not being threatened by other men, actually embracing other men's work and not feeling like you need to push it out. Maybe you could flesh that one out.
Yeah, a little bit. Someone came to Moses with the report that Eldad and Medad were prophesying in the camp, which I said was one of the great overlooked verses in the Bible for sermon texts. And Joshua says, who had served as Moses' assistant from his youth, says, "My Lord Moses, tell him to shut up, tell him to be quiet." And basically, you don't want an old guard mentality to develop on the elder board or with the pastor, and which will happen when you're isolated and bitter and envious. It's just 2 steps away from becoming paranoid.
Right.
Right. And then when you're sort of wrapped up in your bubble or your cocoon, but the Spirit of God isn't wrapped up there with you, and so the Spirit of God starts moving in other places. He calls someone to do this and this, and if you see all those things as threats to your position or threats to your authority, and try to clamp down on it, it's like slapping mercury with your hand. It's just going to go all, scatter everywhere else. So basically, it's really, and Moses responds rightly, would that the Spirit of God fell on all of God's people. So that is further evidence that however much the Spirit was upon Eldad, Medad, the Spirit was really on Moses because he was open-handed. One of my favorite quotes is from Charles de Gaulle, who said, "Graveyards are full of indispensable men." And you're going to be out at some point, and someone else is going to have to do it at some point. You might as well be preparing for it.